Enchanted. This is Sabrina Monarch of monarchastrology.com, bringing you the astrology forecast for February 17 to February 23rd, 2020. These are found in written version at monarchastrology.com, and I branched out to YouTube more recently to bring you a video version as well, where I read you what I wrote and add extra commentary. The Saturn-Uranus square, which is a characterizing influence of 2021, and I have a video about it on this channel, exacts this week, and the Sun will enter Pisces, and Venus in Aquarius will square Mars in Taurus. It wouldn't be surprising to feel tense this week, and or to notice that others are. Longer-standing patterns in our personal psychologies, our relationships, and in social and collective history are coming to a head. That's what happens with square or 90-degree astrology, and Saturn-Uranus is a pretty big transit, catalyzing certain paradigm shifts. And in order for a paradigm shift to occur, the fullness of the old paradigm must come into our awareness. It's when we notice something fully, are fully conscious of it, and then the gears turn and something new happens. Inwardly, the things that may carry significant charge at this moment may reveal the places within us where we battle between conserving the past out of habit or wisdom versus moving forward into the unknown out of naivete or wisdom. It's not so simple that one is better than the other. Both have their shadows and higher potentials. So that sense of upholding the past versus moving forward, we see that as a kind of binary or a duality when they really have quite a dynamic interaction. This week's transits have me reflecting on the creative possibilities of tension. It isn't the best for our health to be tense all of the time or tense unnecessarily. Sometimes, though, when contemplating paradox or an impasse, or a seemingly impossible situation, tension has a way of unraveling us into a process of surrender. To put in the effort of trying to understand the nature of the impasse and then to sleep on it, perhaps literally, and wake up with a new insight that has been born from the pressure. So before we start, I'm going to share a screen for a moment to share a few announcements. One is that I do have a mailing list, and this is the best place to be if you want to be updated about when my course is open for enrollment, as well as when my astrology reading bookings open. And it's also where I'll send you these forecasts and also update you about any special events, talks, that kind of thing. You can also follow me on Instagram at Sabrina Monarch. I do have a podcast, Magic of the Spheres. I've been uploading these forecasts to Magic of the Spheres, but I also host interviews. And I'm in the middle of a moving process right now. I'm moving out of state, but as that settles, I'll be conducting and uploading more interviews. But we also have a fairly extensive backlog of amazing interviews. So I would go check that out and subscribe if you haven't already. My astrology reading bookings are currently closed. I am taking new clients for ongoing mentorship and coaching, which is a 6-month or 1-year commitment. And if you're interested in working with me in that capacity, you can send me an email at sabrina@monarchastrology.com. And I think I will be sharing some more information about what the mentorship is. Mostly, it's not like a specific program that I run with every person. It's actually really personal to you and what you're working through and how I can support you given my skill sets with astrology and different personal development techniques. But I would still love to share more information about that coming up, probably when I'm settled into my new place. But if you know that you want to work with me, you have that knowing, go ahead and send me an email. My Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is currently in session, and stay tuned either on my mailing list or here, but my mailing list is, again, the best way to stay in touch about when the next course dates are coming. And, oops, I meant to stop my share. Okay. While you're here, please like this video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think and how you're doing and how this video resonates with you. So this week, on February 17th, we have Saturn in 7 degrees of Aquarius, square Uranus in 7 degrees of Taurus. And this transit is active and in orb for all of 2021. And its exact hits are this day, February 17th, and December 23rd, 2021. And you can watch my video on it on my channel, and it's linked below. On February 18th, the sun enters Pisces at 2:44 a.m. The sun will stay in Pisces until March 20th, 2021, the equinox. The water signs of the zodiac, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, relate to our emotions and feelings, our emotional security, and to soul. Pisces is the third water sign following Cancer and Scorpio if we go in the natural zodiac, starting from Aries, ending in Pisces. We develop an ego in Cancer, and our basic emotional imprinting from early childhood, our attachment style, and our relationship with nourishment and safety in Cancer. In Scorpio, we risk who we already are to bond and merge deeply with another or with something other than ourselves, and therefore to transform, to change who we are by this alchemical process of merging or bonding with something other. Through these bonds, we experience a third thing to which we may not be aware of how to find within ourselves without sharing resources or codes with that which is other. So that, unique third combination that occurs from you and one other person, and what's the third thing of that connection. Thus, because of this sense of this rare or magical opportunity that comes from this union, Scorpio puts us in touch with our most profound psychological needs and even compulsions, our development of power and our power plays and power exchanges, as well as our capacity to manipulate and the possibility of loss, betrayal, and abandonment. So that's heavy. So let me break that down a little bit more. There's a lot of this wisdom along the path of self-development, or maybe it's something like finding love, where there's this truism that it was always you all along, like it's always been within you, and everything else in the external simply is a mirror back to you or something that gives you permission. And there's some degree of truth to that. There's also the way that everything is in this dynamic exchange of energy. So learning about how to navigate specific, intense involvements, relationships that have a higher emotional charge, a higher sense of emotional stake or risk, and how it is that we can stay in touch with our sovereignty and our empowerment, and also be ethical and collaborate, to create mutually enhancing relationships and situations, as opposed to engaging in extractive dynamics, trying to get things, trying to have power over others to fulfill some of our psychological needs, right? So learning about how to be in deep relationship where it gets vulnerable and messy and complex. That's what we're talking about with Scorpio. And because of the intensity or the high level of emotional stakes involved, it can really confront us with our soul, with our deeper psychology, with our shadow, and be an opportunity for emotional growth and creating more fulfilling, enhancing relationships. So someone who really wants love, for example, but has emotionally manipulative patterns, if they are deeply honest with themselves, they will start to realize that emotionally manipulating people doesn't actually get them the thing that they truly desire, which is deep connection and love, right? So learning how to unwind and unravel that kind of shadow pattern and what to replace it with, what kinds of behaviors or deep states of being are more empowering, essentially. In Scorpio, I really look at power as a positive thing. It's important to be in touch with our personal power and to be noble in the ways that we wield that power. it doesn't feel good to feel powerless. It doesn't feel good to claw one's way through life, right? And so figuring out how to be in touch with that deep power that is inherent within us, as well as what experiences, what relationships, what circumstances would empower us along our life path, and how to be in ethical relationship with those things. And then by the time we get to Pisces, the third water sign, we are challenged to let it all go and dissolve back into the source from which all the particular and ephemeral things of this world emerged. So, what's beyond that deeply emotionally charged relationship? God, essentially. While at once this provides us with an opportunity for spiritual union, this dissolving can be bittersweet. We can feel less in control, less effectual, and more challenged to surrender. Sailors and surfers do not fight the sea and win, but their successful navigation of the ocean resides in their capacity to harmonize with that flow. While at harmony with the flow, however, we have a lot more capacity than we do as individuals. So it's a little bit of that paradox or duality, that surrendering. We feel like we lose some kind of agency, but really it's the egoic agency that we're losing. And when we're in deep union with spirit, we actually are greatly empowered by that. But of course, it's a relationship. And so if there is a clash between our ego, our personal will, and the universal will, then we're just kind of like tossing and turning at sea. And it's this dramatic thing. A really powerful prayer to build could be about aligning personal will with spiritual will, so that your desires are in alignment with what the universe desires for you. And that way you're not fighting all the time in life, but there's a deeper relationship or bond that's formed. The mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, each come at the end of a season and are transitional energies. The solidified fullness or peak of the season just before begins to make way for the next. So the mutable signs have a way, they come after the fixed, so they kind of shake up what has been solid or formed and start to dissolve it. With Pisces as a mutable water sign, it's easy for one emotion to quickly mutate into the next. We become more emotionally sensitive and impressionable under the influence of Pisces. And without other forms of emotional regulation at our disposal, it's possible to tailspin. One thing goes wrong in our subjective perception of it, at least. And in a few beats, we're wondering what the purpose of life is or why we're even bothering, and really spiral. On the opposite side of this tailspin, down, there is the opposing opportunity to spiral upward. Utilizing techniques like positive thinking, following our highest excitement, visualization, or doing whatever it is that puts you in a good emotional place, and taking care of yourself in that way, by continually resourcing these elevated places within us and weaving them into our reality through our words and choices, we have some agency to create our reality. See how they're both Piscean, though, where it's like if we really get washed over by the sense of futility or despair or hopelessness, it's like water going down a drain. And then through gratitude or rejoicing or through celebration or through joy, whatever it is, that we can create these spirals upward. During Pisces season, however, for years, I really slept on the awareness that it was Pisces season. Either I didn't know it was because it was much earlier in my life, or because I already have a lot of Pisces in my chart, I was like, whatever, it doesn't matter if the sun is in Pisces. But now routinely, when I look back on this time of the year, it is a time of being in the ocean of emotion, being in the washing machine spin cycle. And even for me, as someone who is so devoted to joyfulness and creating my reality, it doesn't mean that I don't entertain negative experiences or have certain emotions overcome me that feel harder to shake off. And those things really, I think are part of life and they work me or they show me things. It's just that I have a habit of resourcing myself emotionally frequently because that's the kind of life that I want to live. And I think it's also something that is really important to affirm because in our general kind of social conditioning or societal conditioning, we don't really talk about the way that this reality is constructed, that it's a history of past thoughts and actions of people that came before us, and that, we're also co-creators. And so to the degree that we take responsibility for our emotional states and choose, like to not be limited, I'm losing my place in my notes, to not be limited by what's concretely happening, but to create an emotional state at will and then watch the universe participate with us and bring us more circumstances that validate that feeling state that we chose on purpose. This kind of teaching is ego shattering. People really like to be attached to their pain and suffering. There's a degree that honoring our grief and being in touch with our pain is human. And then there's a degree where it becomes indulgent or egoic. And we're continuing to perpetuate that pain by identifying so heavily with it. And I think that the freedom that Pisces can bring us is realizing that the imagination is just as real, that even like our subconscious doesn't really seem to tell the difference between a real memory and something that we invented, that we're still going to run our nervous system chemicals or like adrenaline, endorphins, etc., based on the things that we're thinking, regardless of whether or not they're imaginary or real situations. And so to really take responsibility for our existences here and create our own experience is kind of like the fun game that we get to do in Pisces. But of course, at the shadow side, it also comes with feeling overpowered by emotional currents or by situations in reality that feel like we just got swept under a wave. And that can happen when things go way different to plan, or, some shocking or kind of grief-inducing event happens, or any of those kinds of things. And then, of course, Pisces too is about the process of healing from such events. I'll come back here. So, and yet we often have to be challenged to let go of both the downward tailspin and the upward spiral. For both our dreams, one arguably more pleasant, beneficial, and productive than the other, as I'm so emphatic about. There are inevitably forces beyond our conscious awareness, control, or agency that also have a say in the grand drama of life. With Pisces, we can do our absolute best to co-create, but we must also learn the art of surrender. It's a kind of arrogance to think that we know more than the universe itself. And so if you look back at your life and you have certain moments in time that were deeply challenging for you, but in retrospect, you see how they were part of your development, and maybe you've come to deep peace spiritually with those events, you can see how we don't always know. We really don't always know what's happening. And sometimes instead of the universe mirroring exactly what we desire and want, we experience something that we think we don't want at that moment in time. The divine and exquisite challenge of Pisces is that we have one foot in the realm of ultimate possibility and one foot in the realm of reality as it already is here and now. One foot in the dream, one foot in the waking life. These realms are meant to be in communication, or else we tend to suffer. If our fantasy life exceeds the fulfillment we manage to feel in our quote real life, we become prone toward escapism or numbing. Anything to enter the fantasy and escape the monotony and the drudgery of life. If we are too mired in quote real life, we feel a vague yearning for something more satisfying or meaningful. The art of Pisces is weaving the dream into this reality and recognizing that everything that exists in this reality that we experience as real was at one point a dream that someone or many someones anchored into form through what we could call inspired action, right? They were acting on the wave of inspiration. But perhaps also some of these things that we experience as real were the result of not so good dreams, very limited dreams. And yeah, that's up to kind of like our subjective judgment or analysis. But you can feel the difference in your system, in your body, when you are acting on a wave of deep inspiration versus when you are confused and taking an action from that place of confusion. And it's all a practice. We don't have it perfect every time. When the sun is in Pisces, our emotional lives are more permeable. We can feel more sensitive and impressionable. And elements of our lives can be in flux and confronting us with the unknown, and thus often challenges of faith and surrender. On the positive side, we may be more open to enchantment and magic, more dreams and visions, and we may dissolve old emotional patterns in a way that feels truly healing. The unknown is such a place where we can project our anxiety, or as Mark Jones calls in The Soul Speaks, our basic anxiety, just the basic anxiety that all humans have. And so if you notice, if you listen to your thoughts and see the kind of disastrous kind of possibilities that you're going to when something is changing in your life, versus do you take that moment to make a choice of this could be the best thing that's ever happened, or this next chapter of my life is going to be equal to, even better than the previous one. Like having a playful attitude in how we co-create the situations in our lives. And there's a way that, this is about training the mind. On February 19th, Venus in 23 degrees of Aquarius will square Mars in 23 degrees of Taurus at 3:04 p.m. Squares or oppositions between Venus and Mars tend to correlate with discord in relationships, or at a mundane level, conflicts between men and women. Issues around justice can also spike during this time. In the channeled text, The Hathor Material by Tom Kenyon, there is a concept in Chapter 5 that there are 4 cornerstones necessary to achieve a balanced higher state of awareness. So I'll start this quote. These 4 cornerstones are: 1, your physical relationship, or your relationship with your physical body, as well as your other subtle bodies, including your ka. On a side note, the way that ka is used in this book is really similar to chi. Continue quote. Your relationship with yourself and others. 2, your relationship with yourself and others. 3, your relationship to the service you give to the universe, to the world, and to your community, which often takes the form of a career, though not always exclusively. 4, your conscious relationship with the sacred elements that make up the world in which you live. These sacred elements are earth, fire, water, and air/space. So to recap those 4 cornerstones that make a balanced ascension into higher awareness are your relationships with your physical body, your chi, your relationship with yourself and others, your relationship with service, and the conscious relationship you make to the sacred elements. Then the channel further elaborates, start quote, today on Earth, some people believe that relationships are superfluous, that they are not really needed, and that positive interactions and relationships with other humans can be bypassed. From our understanding, this belief is an error. What is required is to relate to other humans in a clear, honest fashion, and it is important for you to be truthful about your experience and forthcoming about your needs and desires. As your consciousness expresses itself through relationships, you are given a powerful mirror that reflects back to you your own unresolved issues. It is easy to delude yourself into believing that you have attained a certain level of awareness and compassion when you do not interact with other humans. But as soon as you choose to interact, if you are honest and clearly aware, those places in yourself that you are not loving and compassionate will come into your awareness. Why? The other person or persons will rub you the wrong way. So relating to others can create friction and considerable discomfort, even pain. It is our observation that most humans avoid these times of uncomfortable situations by abandoning themselves emotionally, by not speaking their truth, and by hiding their true intentions from both themselves and others. Then, in that moment of opportunity where awareness could have become crystalline and clear, it becomes muddied and unclear. Unfortunately, this is a condition that is frequently experienced in relationships. There are many reasons why this imbalance occurs, but without going into all the various reasons, we offer you a solution. The essence of our solution is to strive. The essence of our solution is that in relationship with other humans, strive to be more direct, more honest, and more truthful with yourself about your needs and desires, and then communicate these more clearly to others. End quote. I really loved this concept. There was an image basically of a pyramid that's representing a higher state of spiritual awareness, and there were 4 pillars. And setting up this idea that within human culture and how we think about spirituality, there's some trend of cutting oneself off from the world or from people in order to go have a spiritual experience at a monastery or something, or feeling enlightened in one's own company, but then having trouble with people or with family. And just thinking about embodiment and the embodiment movement and this idea that there is spirituality to be found with our relationship to our bodies and with the earth and with each other. So moving away perhaps from patriarchal visions of spirituality and more into a balance with the feminine, which relates so much to connection. So here's some other things I wrote about this transit. As a society, we still have a lot of punitive forms of justice as opposed to restorative justice. And this also takes the form in the microcosm in the ways that individuals deal with conflict. When we other or demonize another person, it can be a way to put them in a box and avoid the complexity of our relationship to them and the feelings that arise within us as a result. Often the shadowy feelings or what part of us was connected to the experience. Often, even a negative experience can further clarify our own direction or value systems if we are willing to do the work of digesting and interpreting our experiences consciously. I've personally been meditating a lot lately on the concept of treating others with dignity. I've been thinking about it and thinking about how I would define or describe it. If we were all to take the attitude that we are all sparks of the divine to affirm our own magic and divinity, as well as the magic and divinity of others, we might see more opportunities for positive creativity in all of our interactions. It is certainly not always true at the personality or ego level to be friends with everyone. There is a place for choosing not to be in connection and for boundaries. However, we might consider how often our interactions with people come from an actually noble place, a place of Shaman Durek's like lifting and shifting phrase is coming to mind, versus a combative or defensive or even dissociated place. An opening for Venus-Mars contacts, such as the one we're in now, is to stay in connection while being in disagreement. The Hathor material speaks of emotional self-abandonment. And as I interpret it, this could have to do with being peaceable when it is dishonest, to stuff away our preferences and not negotiate. Disagreement and discord is a much different sensation in the nervous system than peace and agreement, right? Like, how do you feel in your body when you're having a really aligned encounter with someone that feels really connected and positive and peaceful versus how do you feel when you're kind of locked into some kind of disagreement or combative moment with someone else? It's a much different bodily sensation. Honest disagreement does not necessarily feel like connection. And yet it also is. And it's a really beautiful thing too when relationships have this space for disagreement and for arguing or for discord, like the love being big enough to hold it, and the, personal sovereignty or kind of like nervous system, like balance or strength. I don't know if those are the right words, but the ability to really actually have the emotional range to be in a situation of discord and not just split and sever and cut and be like, this is too much, but to actually be able to open and connect in the Martian experience, where Mars kind of brings more of the severing or the cutting energy. And I think that for any of you who have these kinds of relationships in your life, or you're the kind of person who likes to have it out and talk about things as they come up, there is a kind of magic or kind of energy that happens in the air when something comes to the surface and it's addressed and the relationship transforms. The relationship isn't static, it's dynamic. There's a a deeper seeing and witnessing of one another, and something just happened. And it's an interesting skill set of being able to be Martian, to know where you stand, to know where you stand as apart from another, and also Venusian, to really listen and to keep the heart open, and to communicate skillfully in those kinds of moments. And with this square happening in the contemplative Aquarius and the hermetic Taurus, it may be useful to reflect in moments where we are alone about what our preferences and desires are, then to form the bridge to make these preferences and desires known to others. I think sometimes Aquarius can like space, like to see things from farther away. Taurus likes to be alone and in its own energy. Like both Taurus and Aquarius can have like an introverted kind of quality. So just thinking about the part of this tension involving some need for reflection and for tuning in with ourself at a kind of embodied level, what do I really want to desire? And how can I form the bridge to connect with another based on these current needs and desires? And then on February 20th, why did I write 2020 here? 2021, Mercury stations direct in 11 degrees of Aquarius at 4:52 a.m. Pacific. You might notice some changes immediately, but Mercury will leave retrograde shadow officially on March 12th, 2021. And this is when Mercury reaches the degree of Aquarius where Mercury originally stationed retrograde. Mercury will exit Aquarius and enter Pisces on March 15th. So if you go back in the recent forecast, if you want, or in the written version, you can find some more things I've written about Mercury and Aquarius, and just review kind of what's been happening in the last couple of weeks. Mercury and Aquarius is such a brilliant placement. I feel like it's a placement that taps into a very extensive range or field of information. And it has, to me, like a very electric and sometimes even psychic or telepathic quality. I think Aquarius is really tuned into the hive, tuned into the network, able to pick up frequencies and messages. And of course, that also interacts with our belief systems, how we think information is spread. Do we think information or our thoughts are generated in the brain by our physical chemistry, or do you think that they float through the air and we catch them and receive them? I identify a lot more with the latter. And for that reason, things like telepathy or channeling are very possible. So with Aquarius, when you think about getting like an inspired idea or a vision, there's a way of thinking of how did that visit you? How did it arrive from the ether? Why is it that you get your most inspired ideas in the shower or by running water? Aquarius representing the water bearer, for example. So I hope that it's been a enjoyable Mercury retrograde. I don't think the transit is as unpleasant as it's often made out to be in popular culture, popular astrology. To me, Mercury retrogrades are associated with like receiving a message 3 times, a synchronicity, magical detours, things maybe not going to plan, but something else happening instead that is worth it. And it challenges us to be a little bit more flexible and playful and open to the fork in the road. All right. I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I'll see you soon.